Hi, welcome. I'm Fazia Costi, and today we are talking with Eric Jorgensen. He is the founder of the True North Disability Planning. It's a national consulting company that helps families, individuals, and professionals navigate the maze of disability benefits, resources, and services. He has been helping his clients find answers since his retirement from the Navy in 2012, which is a long time ago. Uh, he was widowed the same year he retired, and I'm not saying he's old. At the same time, his 12-year-old autistic son, William, was completely dependent on him and his wife for everything. His frustration with this difficulty of figuring out what he had to do navigating services with his son led him to start Special Needs Navigator. So, welcome to the show, Eric.
Thank you, Fazia, and thank you for not saying I'm old.
I saw your face. I'm like, I am not saying you're old. I'm just saying you've been retired for a while. So, yeah. So thank you for coming on the show, and I'm really looking forward to your take on disability and how you navigate it, because you do have quite a bit of experience dealing with this with your lovely son. So let's talk a little bit about your background. How did you? I mean, I know that you had some challenges at the beginning. Your wife passed away. Your son is autistic, and you've had to deal with all these different challenges. But what, like, was there something specific that really got you, that kind of lit the fire under you to kind of start this project?
It's a good question, Fazia, and it wasn't a fire that was lit right away. And when I first came out of the Navy, I'm like, I'm going to be a financial advisor because my wife didn't have life insurance, and I was stuck with owning a house in Connecticut and renting one in Silver Spring, Maryland, two very expensive places to live.
Yeah.
And and so I thought that was my calling, and I did that for a lot of years. And as I grew as a financial planner, and I wanted to help people like me, people who had disabled children, who maybe had one or two events in their life. I've lived through several, retirement, being widowed, things like that. So I started Special Needs Navigator in 2017 because I kept coming against this wall of, well, financial planning, the way I was taught it, doesn't really cover helping people understand what a Medicaid waiver is, or why they should apply, or what to say when their case manager says, well, what do you need? Which is
Right.
what used to drive me up a wall. It's like, I don't know what I need. Nobody gave me an instruction book and said, this is what you should be doing.
If I
You
knew what I
know,
needed, I wouldn't be here asking you, right?
right. And
Yeah.
you have, and then when your child's in school, all the focus, right or wrong, is on the IEP, and making sure they get everything they need from the IEP. So as my son started getting older and older, I'm like, well, he's not gonna be in school forever. What am I
Right.
supposed to be doing? And then I would look on the internet, and there would be nothing that I could find that said, here's what you should do. So gradually I got more and more disillusioned with financial planning, because there's a lot of really good planners out there that I don't need to add to that mix. Nobody was talking about, and I don't think anybody is talking about it now, what to do if your child's 14, 15, and you're looking at leaving high school. Do you stay till they're 18 and then get a diploma, or do you get the certificate? What's the difference? What's this disability invisible cliff everybody talks about, right? So
Well, explain that. Explain, what is the invisible cliff that everyone talks about?
so
That nobody seems to know what it is, but everyone talks about it.
the cliff, in air quotes, is the loss of support you get when your child leaves high school. So when they're in
Right.
high school, by and large, and education advocates out there might be rolling their eyes at me, but by and large, you can get a lot of the support you need by putting it in the IEP or the 504 plan, saying these are the supports my child needs for his or her education.
Correct.
And it's protected by IDEA. It's all protected. You're right or wrong, the schools are supposed to give you those. And
Right.
if they don't give them to you, you have recourse. You can hire an attorney, you can hire an advocate, you can do something about it. When they leave high school, those protections go away. There's nothing out there that is guaranteed anymore. You are not guaranteed to get supports from the state. You're not guaranteed to get money from the federal government. You are not guaranteed to get any kind of help at all once your child leaves high school. And the challenge is, every state will have a Medicaid waiver that provides support for individuals with intellectual developmental disabilities. However, many states do not have enough money to fund the programs that all of those individuals need. So there will often be a waiting list or criteria to say you have to have a certain IQ or some kind of barrier to keep you from getting the support. And the sooner you know about that barrier and the sooner you get on that waiting list, the better. The problem I ran into is I didn't know that I was supposed to be signing up. So in Maryland, there's an autism waiver that has a 14-year waiting list.
Oh,
And
I'm
I
sorry,
found out
14?
about it. Yeah. And I
That's
found out about it.
outrageous.
And I found out about it when my son was 13. But because you can only be on one waiver at a time, it goes away at 21. So at 13, I signed up because, maybe, but there was realistically with a 14-year waiting list, he was never going to get support. But if you sign up when you get the diagnosis, then you could, theoretically get, some years of support. And it's like that in a lot of other states.
By the time they get support 14 years later, I mean, they're teenagers and, all those years are lost.
Yes, but you still get all the normal support that you would get from your IEP and your early intervention and your speech.
Okay.
And, you still get all that. My son had that.
Okay.
But this would be ABA or if you need music therapy or whatever, the autism waiver was meant to pay for all those other therapies. And then with my son, he ended up getting a certificate, so he would leave school at 21. And I didn't really want him to get a certificate. I wanted him to get a diploma. But then they explained to me, well, there's a gap. If he leaves school at 18, the waiver isn't funded until 21. So you're going to have 3 years where he's sitting around the house not getting any support from the state. And he may not qualify because because he left before the waiver started. He may go on a waiting list because Maryland funds, it's just weird the way they do it, but Maryland funds transitioning youth at age 21. So everybody who leaves school at 21, the governor has put it in their budget to have money for that year. Maryland is unique. Other states like California, you just go to the regional center, you say, I have a child with disability, you get help, you don't have to sign up for a waiver. Or you go to Connecticut and you find out, unless I have an intellectual disability, meaning my IQ is lower than 70, or I have an autism diagnosis, I'm not going to get any support because they don't have enough money. So if you have Down syndrome with an IQ of 72, you're not getting any help. But, I use those 3 states to highlight nobody was talking about this.
No, they're not. And I mean, I was familiar with some of the stuff on the West Coast because that's where I lived for so many years. But the East Coast is surprising me every day. Every time I hear about certain things, I'm kind of stunned.
Yes, and I wanted people to know about this. So, that led to me starting Special Needs Navigator and consulting with families and helping families figure out what they need to do. That morphed into me building roadmaps for all 50 states. So because I'm only one person, I can only work with, so many people. And that's
the fact that you did it for every state is absolutely, one of the nicest things you could have done for people, because there's so many people out there who need the help that don't even know where to start. Yeah. So you at least give them that starting point.
And I don't know if you've created a lot, so I'm sure you get this feeling where I started to thinking, this will probably be a 3 or 4 month project. 2 years later, I was like, I am not letting this get the best of me.
I'm familiar with that feeling. Yes. Yeah. So you have this great system in place. It's for all 50 years, for 50 states, not 50 years. Sorry. But you get the point to, as a parent, you get to that point where you're just frustrated. So where could somebody go and get this information? How do they kind of navigate their way through as to what they need, what they don't need? Do you have it divvied up by state? So when they go on your website, they can just say, okay, I'm from, California, I can go here, or from Colorado, I can go here, and I can get everything I need to navigate my way through the system for my child.
Thank you, Fazia. Yes, I have. If you go to my website, truenorthdisabilityplanning.com, there's a tab at the top that says roadmaps. You
Okay.
click on that. I'm not a very I'm function I'm function over form, so it's not going to be a very pretty. But yeah, you're going to scroll down and it's alphabetical. So it'll start with like Alabama or whatever, and then end at Wyoming or whatever
Whatever that last state is.
yeah. And you just go down, you find your state or states if you're a financial advisor or somebody working with people in multiple states, and you buy it. And part of my promise to the families out there like mine is I will keep them updated as best I can. So
How much do you charge for that roadmap?
$59.99.
Okay,
So $60.
That is like a steal. I mean, that is pennies for the amount of frustration that you save them. That is an absolutely amazing purchase. And they can, I mean, you spent a lot of time researching this stuff, didn't you?
Yeah, and I still do. I have, I think 15 or 16 Google alerts I go through every morning. Wow. Because I want to, and I'm signed up to the states to get to notifications from the states because they'll tell you if they're changing something. But at the average parent, speaking as the average parent before I did this, didn't have time to read through all that crap.
Nobody does. Yeah, no, absolutely. This is amazing. So tell me a little bit about, what are the details that people have to look for? So you've got Social Security, you've got, planning for your child's future. You've got Medicaid, you've got, all these different topics that you have to address. Can you kind of walk us through what a parent would have to look at and like what thought processes you use to kind of navigate all of this?
I'll do my best. So the way I looked at it, and I'm more of an engineer brain, so there might be people out there that are more artistic than me whose brains aren't as linear. So I took a very linear process. Thinking about it, when my son first got his diagnosis, what should I be doing? And I'm not talking about support groups or mommy groups or anything like that. They serve a purpose, but I'm form over function. So I wanted to know, let's use Maryland, for example. I wish I'd known about the autism waiver because I could have signed him up for that as soon as he got the diagnosis. So once he has an autism diagnosis, I put him on the waiting list. Or if you live in California, you could sign him up for a regional center. If you live in a state with a Katie Beckett waiver, you can sign up for the Katie Beckett waiver as soon as your child gets a diagnosis. So a Katie Beckett waiver is a waiver for children under the age of 21 that does not take the parent's income or assets into account, which is usually a reason why people feel like they can't get anything because they make too much money or they have too much money. If you live in a state that has a Katie Beckett, Katiebeckett, or a TEFRA, TEFRA, then you can apply for those waivers if you have a child with a disability, any type of disability, but it has to impact the child. ADHD is probably not going to be enough of a disability to qualify.
But if they have a dual diagnosis, maybe?
Yeah, if you have ADHD and cerebral palsy, with maybe a spastic limb, or if you have I'm getting more and more messages from people with rare genetic diseases, where they're not finding a lot of supports.
Yeah.
But they need the help. That would be the kind of thing that you can apply for. And I think there's 34 states that have a Katie Beckett. The majority have some type of thing for minor children. I don't know the number off the top of my head, but I think there's a list on my website that you can get for free. But that should be the first place is, okay, I just got a diagnosis. Is there anything in my state besides school? And school's important. It's just not my area of expertise. Is there anything that I can get that'll help me with my child? That's going to help pay for therapies. That's going to, whatever. And then the next thing is, am I in a financially bad place? So if you're a single parent and you're raising a child with a disability and you don't have a support network, odds are you're probably not making a lot of money because you're probably working odd jobs or, catch as catch can. You may be able to qualify for Social Security for your child because you're probably not making a ton of money.
Oh, I bet a lot of people don't even know that. What's the cutoff? Do you know?
ballpark $1,300 a month.
Okay.
It's pretty low.
Yeah.
But don't quote me on that exact number, but it's pretty low. And then you
Okay.
can't have more than $2,000 in your name. So that's why it's harder for people with minor children to qualify. I'm not saying don't apply, but if you're making $50,000, $60,000 a year, even though it feels like you're not making any headway, you're probably making too much money.
You're not going to qualify for that.
Yeah,
Okay.
but if you again, I don't ever want to say don't apply, because
Right.
I'm not Social Security, right? Like,
Right. You
I
never
just
know.
know, right?
Yeah.
I know in my experience, I haven't seen too many people qualify. But if you have a child with significant medical needs, maybe Social Security will say, oh, they're on the compassionate allowance list, we'll go ahead and give it to you. Again, it's not going to be for the average person with ADHD or cerebral palsy. That's not, the individual doesn't have to use a wheelchair. It's got to be a really significant disability.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So that's what I would do when your child is younger.
So when they're young, you want to get them on as many wait lists as possible, is what I'm hearing.
Yes.
And apply for as many things as you possibly can, whether you think you're going to be able to get it or not. Just apply.
Yes.
And
make
find
them
out.
tell you no. Make them tell you no,
Yeah.
and ask them why. Find out why you were denied. Most of the time they'll tell you. When you get the letter, they'll tell you why. Oh, you make too much money, or oh, you don't meet these wickets.
And then maybe you could apply again in the future and you would qualify. Got it.
Exactly. Now, the exception to that is Louisiana. I think it's Louisiana. You can't apply for a Medicaid waiver until you're 16. So check with your state to see what the state rule is. But by and large, you can apply whenever, you just probably, the adult waivers you're not going to get until 21. Katie, Becca, and Tefra, you'll get under the age of 21.
Okay.
So I would try to get those kinds of benefits, those kinds of supports. The next thing I would do is, the next milestone is age 14, because that's when you can start working with your Department of Voc Rehab or Rehabilitative Services, whatever your state calls it. Every state has a department focused on vocational rehabilitation. They're there to work with anybody with any type of disability. Again, not intellectual developmental, not just physical. You don't have to be blind. Just, it's not only for people who are blind or who are deaf. And what you're doing at 14, or between the ages of 14 and 16, again, depending on your state, is you're asking for pre-employment transition services. So that is when the Department of Voc Rehab comes in and starts evaluating your child for what type of work do they want to do? Where do their strengths lie? What types of skills do they have? Where's their aptitude? And you can bring them in for your IEP meetings. They can come in and sit with the IEP. They can start helping you develop a resume for your child. Many of us, myself included, aren't very good at keeping up with a resume.
Right.
But every company seems to want one when they try to hire you. So get on the ground floor with, okay, my child did this. They worked at a grocery store, stacking shelves. Okay, but
right.
That shows that they have skills, right? Yeah. They can make it to work on time. They can follow direction, all those things.
Right.
So that's the ages of 14 to 18-ish. Okay. Get them in, even if they're only working over the summertime, they can put money aside. Maybe you get an ABLE account. If they're making money, you can get an ABLE account, put the money into the ABLE account, so it's not in their name when you apply for Social Security down the road. And you just say, if they're making $500 or $600 every summer, that's not bad. It really gives them the opportunity to learn what it means to work.
Right. Set those skills in place and develop that work ethic and
and find out what they like and don't like to do. Right. Speaking for myself, there was a lot of jobs I did, that I'm just like, I don't ever want to do that again.
But that's an important skill, or that's a very important thing to know about yourself. Just, just to know that I don't want to ever dig ditches again, ever. Like, that is not for me, like for me, manual labor is just not for me.
Right there with you. Like I came out of the Navy as a journeyman electrician. And you know how much electrical work I've done in the 11 years since I retired?
No.
0.
Well, because you have a different calling now.
Yeah, and I don't like it. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just not something I want to do. But to your point, that that young man or young woman knowing that this is what they don't, and it could be a great way to avoid getting pigeonholed into food filter flowers or some other gender normal.
Yeah.
That's not the best choice of words, but the gender assigned roles.
No, I understand what you're saying. We do tend to kind of put people in categories as we belong in a society. Society does that. Society likes to say you should do this and you would be good at this, and they don't always ask. So I think you're right. I think going into a job and trying things out, and I always recommend students who are young to volunteer. It's like,
Yes.
you just don't know what that will bring you. That could be your next job, because you could find out that you really like that. Volunteering at a kennel is a fantastic way to interact with animals and people, see which ones you like better. Or, I mean, I'm being serious. Some people just don't want to work with other people. And so, yeah, so it's a really great way. Yeah.
And I would caution them to be careful about, don't give it away for free for too long.
Right.
Don't.
But it's a good start. And
yeah.
And I don't think there's anything wrong with volunteering a couple hours a week,
Mhm.
even if you do it long term, because it really does give you that opportunity to develop your social skills and develop that, that sense of, showing up on time, and gives you that integrity that you need for work,
Right.
doing the right thing.
But if they have enough work for you to volunteer for 20 hours, could they turn it into a part-time job?
Exactly. Yeah. But for somebody who's just starting out, I think a couple hours a week is a nice way to just try it out and see if you like it. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's low risk for you and the company.
Right. Right. I tend to hire interns, and I like to do that because if you're willing to do this for free for a few, for a semester, because they're usually from a school, and they need it to graduate. If you're willing to do it for free for a semester, then you're probably going to be a really good employee. And that's how I hire. I hire people who were previously interns for me. They make really good employees, like the one I have right now that does a really great job with a lot of the things I asked him to do. He was an intern to start off.
Right. And that's, oftentimes when you're in school, you have to be an intern, like you said, right?
Yeah.
So, but when you're in high school, there's nothing saying you can't go do an information interview and try to volunteer.
Right.
And see, okay, maybe you're not going to be an accountant doing the books, but if you work in an accounting office, you'll get familiar with the language.
Right.
You'll hear what they do, and you can ask questions.
Yeah. And every business or every company has their own process in place too. So you get to kind of see, if you work in an accounting office, you get to kind of see how an accounting office is run. You may or may not like that. It may move really slow for you, or maybe it's just the right speed for you. So you kind of have to see, and it's going to be very different than the dog shelter down the street, right? So, really, I think it's important to try things out. So that's fantastic.
I would also look to see if your state, your county, your school district has Project Search, which is
what is that?
It's a national program that partners with businesses to do internships like you were describing.
Okay.
They usually rotate people through 3 or 4 different types of companies, and the individual over the period of a school year will go to work for part of the day and come back to do school. And it's free to the individual, it's free to the student, and it's a partnership that Project Search puts on with the school and the businesses. Usually in bigger cities, bigger areas. If you live in a really rural area, you may not find it.
Right. Right. Yeah. Well, who knows? Maybe there's another project that smaller schools have that we don't know about. Who knows?
Right. Or maybe there's interest, and if you can get 2 or 3 schools together in a area, maybe you can find a way to bring something in.
Absolutely.
You never know. Parents are pretty amazing.
Yeah. If there isn't something at your school, you can always start it. I mean, be that parent, be that person that gets in there and says, let's start a little dialogue between us and that mall down the street and see if we can get some internships going.
Yeah.
Be that parent.
Yeah, and you figure if you're in a small town, you probably have, I would imagine you would have more locally owned businesses. So you probably know the business owners,
Absolutely.
right, Fazia? So to your point about being
Yeah,
that parent, why not go and talk to the other? Because you're probably in a community where you know each other.
exactly. And then they're more likely to want to help you because they probably see you at birthday parties and barbecues and
Yeah.
whatever. Yeah. So I think that's fantastic. How about so like once these kids have these services, what's the next step? Like how do they move forward in life? How do they start making goals and transitioning to maybe being more independent? Or if they can't be independent, how do they move forward with that step?
That's a bit more challenging, and it's going to depend on the state you live in, but every individual should have what's called an ISP, an individualized service plan. So like in school, they have an IEP,
Right.
individualized education plan. Around 17, 18, I think, don't quote me on that either, but you're going to start building your individualized service plan where you're going to be working with your Medicaid waiver providers and saying, these are the goals for the individual, for the child. And those are going to be focused more on independent living skills. For example, for my son, one of his goals was to go to the doctor this year because he was very, very resistant to going to a dentist or a doctor. So and I can't make him go. He's his own person.
Right.
So I had, part of the goal was to work with him enough to where he was willing to go, and he did. He went to the doctor. He's still not willing to go to a dentist, but we got him to the doctor to do an annual physical, which is a win. It could be, we want the individual to do laundry 2 times a month unaccompanied or with minimal intervention, right? Those kinds of things. A lot of states are using what's called the person-centered plan. There's a company that designed it, and it's got all these different components: your spirituality, I think, your community, employment, what makes you feel safe, all of that, and you would build out that plan. There's companies out there like Able Transitions that will help you build a person-centered plan. They're a private company, so you're going to pay for them. What you get from the state is free, but it may not be as robust. Or you may not like it as much. So that's where you could hire somebody like Kenzie Clark with Able Transitions to sit down. She does a very good job, but she's not free. So
How much does that typically cost? So if a parent wanted to do that, what are we looking at?
I'm not positive. I would guess probably a couple $1,000s.
Okay. So it's an investment, but probably well worth the money because you're planning out your child's future and you want to make sure that it's done right. So long term, it might actually save you money.
Yeah, and and like you said, it's an investment, but more importantly, it's the child has a voice.
Right.
Kenzie makes sure that the individual with disability is involved every step of the way. And again, I'm sure there's other people out there doing it like Kenzie is. Kenzie happens to be the only one I know about, but she told me they're teaching in college now. There's a whole degree program around around transition planning and helping individuals transition to become more independent adults.
I think that's a great thing because it's surely a need, as I'm sure you know.
Yep. Yeah, and in the employment space, you have Social Security benefits counselors who will help you with ticket to work programs or find employment and things like that. It's still very fractured though. I mean, I would say there's no, to the best of my knowledge, there's no smooth handoff anywhere in the country right now.
So let me ask you this question. So from your perspective, and you seem to know this very well, and you've seen it from beginning to the end because you've had your son diagnosed and now he's becoming more independent. So you've kind of seen the whole process. If you were going to design this if you were going to design a program and you were given this money from the state to design this, what would it look like for you? Like from beginning to end, like what would make it a nice, smooth transition for parents and the children?
If I had my dream world, Fazia,
Yes. If you had your dream world, Eric, tell me, what would you do?
I would have, from the time the child enters the school and a disability is identified, I would have them assigned a navigator. And that navigator would work with the family every year to map out the next year's plans, what needs to be done, what milestones have to be met, and what paperwork has to be done to get there. Because paperwork is the biggest barrier, more often than not, in my opinion. It's not that families don't want the support or aren't trying to get the support, but they're probably filling the paperwork out wrong, or they're not submitting it on time, or they're submitting it to the wrong person, or they don't understand what it's asking. I've been guilty of most of that. Because it's not easy to understand what the paperwork is asking for. So they have a navigator there to sit by them and say, especially if they're not native English speakers, but have somebody that can speak to them in their native tongue, or even if they are native English speakers, they're overwhelmed. So sit down with them and say, okay, let's complete this application, turn it in, and then work, be with them along the way. And I have a vision for this becoming an app, but the challenge with that is still access to the technology, and it's still getting uniformity, right? Okay, I can get this school district to use the app, but I can't get this school district to use it. So in a perfect world, having that navigator, maybe with the app, in an iPad or whatever tablet of your choice, and
well, maybe
mapping
it's
it out.
not for the school. Maybe the app needs to be for the parents.
But yes, and the school, the way it would work would be it would tie in with the IEP, and it would just be this nice, beautiful. Because right now it's the IEP is one silo, the adult.
I think I can help you with that. I do. I think I can help you with that. But I think that would make a beautiful thing. You're right, because it would connect all the dots.
Yeah, and then the navigator would help them apply for Social Security when the child turned 18. The navigator would, in a perfect world, coordinate with them when they're leaving the military to make sure they know what they're doing. The navigator would be there to, if they're looking at getting ready to move to a different state, there would be let's say you're moving from Maryland to Arizona. Well, there would be a navigator that would be on the phone with Arizona saying, okay, these are the waivers benefits, or these are the waiver services we're currently receiving. We know you don't have the same exact waiver. What services can you provide over there? And how long do they have to wait to establish becoming a resident? Because or maybe they waive the residency and say, we know you have this disability. We know you're moving here. As soon as we have a mailing address, we'll start getting you services here and stop the services there. Instead of this 60-day or 90-day or whatever the waiting period is. And then, now you're on a waiting list. If you're already approved.
And parents don't have the resources sometimes to go 60 days without services.
Or longer, because if you move from Maryland to another state, you're going to go to the bottom of the waiting list. So you're screwed.
Wow, that's unfortunate. Huh.
But that would be my perfect world, where there was navigators paid for by the state that was helping families, so families didn't have to come out of pocket to pay for it. And those navigators would be trained and kept up to date, and they would be required to pass proficiency exams every year to show that they're,
You'd have to teach them how to find all this information, because I've never seen anybody do it to your level of perfection. You're a perfectionist. You're definitely a perfectionist. So tell me, what are some of the dangers of, even we're talking about moving, other than just having, a disruption of services? What are some of the other dangers of moving? I mean, people do move.
Well, the biggest one is Medicaid doesn't follow you, Social Security will. So you have to qualify for Medicaid, which is your health insurance, and your Medicaid waiver, which is all your supports.
Okay.
So you could be losing health insurance as well as all the supports. If you're your child's legal guardian, that is state specific. So or conservator in California. So if you're moving to another state, you have to get guardianship in that state and make sure that it carries over.
Before you go or after?
No, you need to make sure that they know that you need to tell the state you're leaving that you're taking the child, because when you get guardianship, the child becomes a ward of the state and you're appointed as the state's representative to care for the child. But the child is really the responsibility of the state.
Oh, wow. I did not know that.
And an attorney could probably tell you if I'm way off base, but that's how I understand it. Like, I had to report when I moved out from one county to the other. And that's why every year you have to file a report to the state what you're doing for your guardian or for your ward, what you're doing for the person you're guardian of.
Interesting. Okay. I did not know that.
And again, an attorney may explain it better. It's just, this is Eric's understanding. Eric is not an attorney.
That's your disclaimer. I am not an attorney. Okay. Wow. That's fascinating. All right. So, is there anything else that you feel our listeners would benefit from knowing? And I know that there's a lot, but like, if you were going to pick your top, your top 3 must knows, what would they be?
The first one isn't a must know. It's don't give in to apathy or lack of hope.
Okay. That's a good one.
It is so easy to give up hope or just feel like it's just feel helpless because there's so much to do. That would be the first thing. The second thing I would tell people is, at the risk of sounding negative, don't put too much of your trust into the state or teachers. They're doing the best they can, but they went to school to be teachers. They didn't go to school to be transition coordinators.
Correct.
So cut them some slack, but don't also follow them blindly, right? Like, you don't get mad at them if they don't know all of the answers to your questions, but be willing to question them. Don't just,
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. So they might have good advice, but it might just be one way of doing things. You might want to research it and make sure that you're doing what's best for you and your family. Yes,
because there are so many new resources coming out. Your podcast, I have a podcast called ABC Disability Planning. There's other podcasts like that out there that are especially for the disability space, that are highlighting all these new organizations. And by and large, when you're employed by a state or any bureaucracy, you want to be safe. So you are sticking with what you know. You're not going to be out there necessarily looking for all the latest and greatest stuff out there and the really leading edge stuff.
Right.
So listen to podcasts like if they're listening to this, if they're hearing this, they're listening to your podcast, but look for other podcasts that resonate with you, that you're like, oh, I think I can get this, right?
No, I agree. And what is yours called again?
ABCs of Disability Planning.
Okay. And if they wanted to go and get a hold of you, where would they go? What's your website?
My website is truenorthdisabilityplanning.com, and you can get my podcast there and everything else. But
fantastic. And when we post this on YouTube and on the podcast, we'll put all that information on there for the listeners as well. But I want to make sure that someone who's listening knows that it is available so they can go look for it. Yeah. So that was 2. What's your third?
Be an informed consumer. It's again, there's a lot of people, maybe a lot is strong language. I see advertisements for how somebody can make your life better in 3 easy payments or something, right? And in most cases, that's not the case. In most cases, our lives are going to be hard. Doesn't mean they have to be bad. It just means we are going to have to do a little more work than the person who doesn't have a child with a disability.
Right. Well,
And
I am a firm believer that everyone on this planet has something to deal with. And I do mean nobody goes unscathed. Everyone has something to deal with. Some of us just have bigger challenges than others, and some of us have more challenges than others, but everyone has something. And so I think, this is a really good this is a really good way to get information out there for those of us who work with individuals who have these types of challenges, or for parents who, really want to just do what's right for their kids. For me, I just refer them to your website, but sometimes they might want to talk to you too. So do you do one-on-one meetings still, or?
I do not, I mean, I charge for it because I offer a 30-minute pick my brain. But by and large, I'm really trying to create enough content that people can figure it out for themselves. And then,
Right.
because I hate putting, I don't like, I'm not one of these people that's okay with just saying, well, the only way you can get any information from me is you have to pay me a ton of money, right?
Right.
That drives me nuts as a parent and
Right.
somebody who tries to get help. So I try to put everything out there either free or reasonably priced to compensate me for my time. And then the people that really need the help, I'm available for the 30-minute consults, but
Right. How much do you charge for your consultations?
$125.
Okay. That's a very, very fair 30-minute price. I think it's well worth it to get that additional information. But you're right, you put so much information out there that our listeners or anyone who's looking for this information can find it, and your prices are absolutely amazing. And so how many clients do you normally see per week for a consultation? Do you have a waiting list right now, or do you have
No,
availability?
I don't have a waiting list. Like I said, I think most people are getting the help they need from the roadmaps.
Okay.
And then and then the consultations are more of I'm stuck,
Okay.
but the roadmap's really meant to be the first step. And then
So the
and if I
consultation
can,
is more for somebody who's like, okay, I have this really unusual situation and I don't know how to navigate this. And then you can help them. Okay.
yeah, I mean, some examples would be we're getting a divorce and we have questions about child support when our child turns 19, and we want you to work with our attorney to help figure that out, or
Okay.
we're moving to another state and we want to make sure we do it right, or is there a state that we shouldn't be moving to? Yes, Florida and Texas, I'm looking at you, don't move there.
Oh, really? Why? Tell me.
They don't, they have not made funding their waivers a priority.
Okay.
So it's very difficult to get support in Florida and Texas. Now, yes, there are people that are living there that are getting good supports, and more power to them. And I'm not saying if you're living in Texas, you're screwed. It's just, it's going to be harder.
Okay. So definitely harder to do that. Okay. So I just want to thank you for coming on the show today, talking about what you do best. Is there any last tidbits that you'd like to share?
I appreciate you having me on, and if I can be of service, I'm happy to be. But make sure people are following you, subscribe to your YouTube channel, because I'm one guest that you bring on, and you bring on so many different people, and that's what I'm talking about. Is even if somebody's tuning into this one, let me see what this is about. Subscribe, because you don't know who the next guest is going to be, or go back to what you've had in the past.
Well, like you, I started the magazine and the podcast because I had so many people that come to me, but they really couldn't afford to pay me and they really needed information. So the magazine and the podcast really helps put out a lot of information. And if people have, are willing to spend the time to look and find that information, it's there. And if they really need that one-on-one, I'm available for that. But you got to have free stuff out there for people so that they can better their lives. And I really appreciate that you do so much and your information is important because it's for the whole country. And I think as you know, autism becomes such an issue. I was reading an article, and you can tell me if this is accurate or not, that 20% of the population growing up right now has been diagnosed somewhere on the spectrum.
I don't know about that. I know 25% of the US population has a disability.
Okay.
So,
And I thought that's a really high number, so we need a lot of services out there to really help. And the other thing that I was reading is that out of the population that is diagnosed autistic, like 80% have a difficult time getting jobs.
yeah.
That's a huge number. That's a really huge number. And I thought, we really need to do something about this, or else we're all going to be working hard to support. And I mean, like, pay for rent and food and house, all that stuff, because they can't get a job. So we really need to do our part and make sure that we help these individuals get to a place where they're productive and independent. And that also gives them that confidence and self-esteem to be better citizens.
Yeah.
So,
And about that, that 80%, that's not reflective of how many people are so impaired by the disability that they can't work like you and I do. They don't, by and large, in my opinion, it's because of things like submit your resume and let a computer screen it, or
right.
get interviewed, and interviews are garbage. Why don't we do something more useful?
Right. Well, I work with a lot of individuals who have anxiety.
Yes.
And that anxiety is what keeps them out of that interview.
Yes.
That
Or
anxiety
not
is,
even applying because they're so anxious that they may not meet what they're
yes.
asking for, because there's this list, like a full page of all the things
Yeah.
you have to be good at.
Yeah, exactly. So it's tough out there. So we really need to talk to people and maybe improve on some of the ways we help others. But I want to thank you once again for coming on the show today. You are absolutely wonderful, and I look forward to working with you again in the future sometime. And if anyone wants to get a hold of Eric, you can go to the little blurb on the bottom of the podcast, and his information is listed there. And we will see you all next time.
Thank you, Fazia.
Thank you.